Sometimes the greatest sacrifices we make for our children lead us to the most unexpected blessings. Miguel Santos knew what it felt like to be judged a single father, working construction jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over his kids' heads. When he bought a seized Cartel mansion at a government auction, everyone in town thought he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The property was notorious, covered in graffiti, and filled with the ghosts of violence. His neighbors whispered behind his back. His own children were embarrassed. But Miguel saw something nobody else could see: a chance to give his family a real home. What he found inside those broken walls changed everything. Hidden throughout the mansion was over $100 million, left behind by a cartel leader's wife, who died trying to make things right. But would this discovery save Miguel's family or destroy everything he'd worked for? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The government auction notice still sat on Miguel Santos's kitchen table 3 weeks later, coffee-stained and wrinkled from his nervous handling. The cracked frame beside it held the only photo he treasured: Maria holding baby Carlos, while 4-year-old Sofia pressed against her mother's legs, all of them laughing at something he couldn't remember anymore. The glass had split right down the middle 2 years ago when he'd knocked it over during one of his sleepless nights, but he'd never fixed it. Some breaks felt too honest to repair. Miguel pushed back from the cramped kitchen table of their one-bedroom apartment and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. 6 floors down, his 15-year-old truck sat between a rusted sedan and a motorcycle that leaked oil onto the asphalt. The truck's bed still held his construction tools from yesterday's job installing cabinets in a house that cost more than he'd make in 5 years. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Papa, you're doing it again." Sofia's voice carried the gentle reproach of a 16-year-old who'd grown up too fast. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room that doubled as his bedroom, school books balanced against her hip. At 16, she already had her mother's thoughtful eyes and the same way of tilting her head when she was worried about him. "Doing what, mija?" "Staring at that paper like it's going to change what you decided." She moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a container of leftover rice. "Carlos is asking questions again." Miguel turned from the window. His 12-year-old son sat at the small dining table that served as homework station, dinner table, and Miguel's desk for paying bills. Carlos had Maria's stubborn chin, but Miguel's dark eyes. And right now those eyes held the skepticism of a boy who'd learned not to trust his father's promises. "What kind of questions?" "The kind where he wants to know if we're really moving to a haunted house where drug dealers used to live." Sofia's voice carried no judgment, just the weary acceptance of someone managing family damage control. "I told him it's not haunted, but I couldn't really argue about the drug dealer part." Miguel sat down across from Carlos, whose math homework lay forgotten beneath his forearms. "It's not haunted, son. It's just a house that needs work. A house where bad people lived." Carlos didn't look up from his pencil. "Mrs. Rodriguez says they found blood on the walls when the police went through it." "Mrs. Rodriguez talks too much." Miguel reached across and touched his son's shoulder. "The house belongs to us now. What happened there before doesn't change what it can become." Carlos finally looked up, and Miguel saw something that broke his heart, the careful expression of a child who'd learned to manage his expectations. "Are we really going to live there? Or is this like when you said we'd get a bigger place after you got the Henderson job?" The Henderson job. Miguel had counted on that commercial contract for months, told the kids they'd be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, maybe even a small house. Then Henderson's nephew got out of college with a construction management degree, and suddenly Miguel's bid wasn't competitive anymore. "This is different, Carlos. We own it. Nobody can take it away from us." Sofia joined them at the table, setting down 3 plates of reheated rice and beans. It was Wednesday's dinner becoming Thursday's breakfast, stretched with extra rice to last until Miguel's paycheck on Friday. "Tell him about Mama's letters," she said quietly. Miguel looked at his daughter, surprised. He'd never told the children about finding Maria's unfinished letters in her jewelry box, the ones where she'd written about her dreams for their family. "What letters?" Carlos asked. Miguel got up and walked to the bedroom closet, reaching behind his work boots for the small wooden box Maria had kept on their dresser. Inside, beneath her wedding ring and the silver cross her mother had given her, were 3 letters in her careful handwriting. He'd found them a month after her funeral, addressed to Sofia, Carlos, and him. He pulled out his letter, the envelope worn soft from handling, and sat back down. "Your mother started writing these when she got sick. She never finished them, but she wanted us to know what she dreamed about for our future." Miguel unfolded the 2 pages, his hands steady despite the emotion in his voice. She wrote, "I dream of Sofia having her own room, with a window that looks out on something beautiful, not a parking lot or another building, but trees or flowers or sky. I dream of Carlos having space to build things, maybe a garage where he can take apart bicycles and put them back together like he loves to do. And I dream of you, mi amor, having a workshop where you can create instead of just fixing other people's broken things." The apartment fell quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic. Sofia reached across the table and took her father's free hand. She wrote about wanting us to have Sunday dinners around a real dining room table, big enough for all of us, and maybe guests someday. She wanted Carlos to be able to run in a backyard, and for Sofia to bring friends over without being embarrassed about where we live. Carlos had stopped pretending to work on his math. She really wrote that. Every word. Miguel folded the letter carefully. "The house I bought it has all those things. It needs work, but it has them." "But Papa," Sofia said gently, "it's also the house where Eduardo Vasquez lived, where he did all those terrible things." Eduardo Vasquez. Even 2 years after his death, the name carried weight in their community. The federal investigation had revealed a network of drug trafficking, money laundering, and violence that had touched dozens of families in their area. 3 local business owners had been killed for refusing to launder money. A teenage boy had been shot for witnessing a deal. 2 young mothers had died in a car bombing meant for someone else. I know the history, mija, but I also know that houses don't carry the sins of the people who lived in them before. What matters is what we bring to a place. Miguel stood and walked to the small window again. From here, he could see the mansion in the distance, perched on a hill overlooking the valley. Even from miles away, its size dominated the skylinear, sprawling Mediterranean-style estate with red tile roofs and what had once been manicured gardens. The federal government had seized it after Eduardo's death, and it had sat empty for 2 years while lawyers argued over the estate. "How much did you really pay for it?" Sofia asked. Her tone was carefully neutral, but Miguel heard the worry underneath. $18,000. He turned back to face them. "Everything we had saved, plus what your tia Carmen lent me." Carlos whistled softly. Even at 12, he understood that $18,000 represented months of their father's labor, countless dinners of rice and beans, and every small sacrifice they'd made since Maria's death. The government appraised it at $400,000 before the seizure. Miguel continued, "The only reason I could afford it was because nobody else wanted to buy Eduardo Vasquez's house. People are afraid of the reputation, the history." "Maybe they're smart to be afraid," Sofia said quietly. Miguel sat back down and looked at both his children. "Do you know what your mother used to say when she was scared about something?" They shook their heads. "She'd say, 'Fear is just imagination, putting its energy in the wrong direction.' She wasn't talking about being careless or ignoring real danger. She meant that sometimes we're so afraid of what might go wrong that we can't see what might go right." He pulled the auction notice toward him and smoothed out the creases. "This house has 15 rooms, including 5 bedrooms. It has a 3-car garage where Carlos can build whatever he wants. It has a kitchen big enough for all of us to cook together, and a dining room with windows that look out over the whole valley. It has a workshop in the basement where I can build furniture instead of just installing other people's cabinets. It also has neighbors who think we're crazy," Sofia pointed out. "Since when do we care what the neighbors think?" Miguel asked. Mrs. Rodriguez has been complaining about something every day for the 6 years we've lived in this building. The Hernandez family thinks we should have moved back to Mexico after your mother died. People always have opinions about other people's choices. Carlos had been quiet through this exchange, but now he looked up with the directness that reminded Miguel so much of Maria. "Are you scared, Papa? About the house?" Miguel considered lying, giving his son the reassurance that fathers are supposed to provide. But these children had lived through their mother's illness and death, had watched him struggle to keep their small family together. They deserved honesty. "Yes, I'm scared. I'm scared that the repairs will cost more than I can afford. I'm scared that people will judge us for living there. I'm scared that I'm making a mistake that will hurt you both." He paused, looking at each of them. "But I'm more scared of staying here, of never giving you the life your mother dreamed about, of playing it safe while your childhood passes by in this apartment." Sophia reached for the auction notice and studied it. The property description was clinical. Residential property, 200 square feet, 2.3 acres, Mediterranean architecture, circa 1998. Seized under federal asset forfeiture laws. Sold as is, no warranties implied. "When do we move?" she asked. Miguel blinked, surprised by the question. "You want to move?" I want to move," she said carefully. "I want to stop being afraid of taking chances. Mama would have been afraid too, but she would have done it anyway if she thought it was right for us." Carlos nodded slowly. "And maybe the neighbors will stop being mean once they see we're just normal people." "Maybe," Miguel agreed. "Or maybe they'll keep being mean, and we'll just have to be strong enough not to let it hurt us." He looked around their cramped apartment, at the couch that folded out for his bed, at Sophia's homework spread across the coffee table because there wasn't room for a desk in the bedroom she shared with Carlos, at the single bathroom where he'd installed extra shelving just to fit their few belongings. "We'll start moving this weekend. I have vacation days saved up, and Carlos is on spring break. Sophia, I know you have school, but—" "I can help in the evenings," she interrupted. "We should do this together." Miguel felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. For the first time since Maria's death, he wasn't making a major decision alone. "There's one more thing," he said. "The house needs a lot of work before it's really livable. We'll be camping out there for a while, fixing things room by room. It won't be comfortable at first." "Neither is this," Carlos said, gesturing around the apartment. "At least there we'll have space to be uncomfortable." That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Sophia on the couch, Carlos in the bedroom, Miguel sat at the kitchen table with the auction paperwork spread in front of him. The deed was already in his name. Miguel Santos, owner of the former Vasquez estate. Tomorrow, he would drive up that hill and walk through his family's new home for the first time as its rightful owner. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the photos he'd taken during the pre-auction walkthrough. The house was bigger than any place he'd ever imagined living. The master bedroom alone was larger than their entire apartment, but it was also damaged graffiti on the exterior walls, broken windows, and water damage from 2 years of neglect. The irony wasn't lost on him that Eduardo Vasquez had built this house with money stolen from their community, and now Miguel would restore it with the honest labor of his hands. Maybe that was how redemption worked, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet decision to take something broken and make it whole again. He looked at the cracked family photo one more time before turning off the light. Tomorrow, they would begin the work of building a new life in a place haunted by an old one. Miguel whispered a prayer to Maria, asking for her blessing on this leap of faith, then went to make his bed on the couch one last time. The mansion looked different in the morning light, less imposing but somehow more real. Miguel stood at the wrought iron gates, keys heavy in his palm, while Sophia and Carlos waited in the truck. The graffiti covering the exterior walls had faded in the sun, but the messages were still clear. Death house, blood money, and worse things, he was glad his children couldn't read from this distance. "You don't have to come in yet," Miguel called back to them. "I want to check everything first." "We're not scared, Papa," Sophia replied. but she made no move to get out of the truck. Miguel walked the perimeter first, his construction worker's eye cataloguing the damage. 2 years of abandonment had taken their toll. The pool was green with algae, outdoor furniture sat rusted and overturned, and several windows were boarded up where vandals had thrown rocks. But the structure was sound good bones, as his mentor used to say. The front door opened with surprising ease. Inside, the mansion felt cavernous after their cramped apartment. The foyer stretched up 2 stories, topped by a chandelier that had somehow survived the neglect. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight streaming through tall windows, and Miguel's footsteps echoed on marble floors. He moved through the ground floor methodically: living room, formal dining room, kitchen, family room, study. Each room was larger than their entire apartment. The federal agents had removed all furniture and personal belongings, leaving behind only the built-in features, cabinets, light fixtures, and architectural details that spoke of expensive taste. In the kitchen, Miguel ran his hands along granite countertops and opened empty cabinets. This was where Eduardo Vasquez had eaten breakfast with his family, where his wife Elena had prepared meals, where their children had done homework. The mundane reality of it struck him. This had been someone's home before it became a symbol of corruption and violence. Upstairs, the bedrooms told a different story. The master suite was immense, with a sitting area and balcony overlooking the valley. But it was the smaller bedrooms that affected Miguel most clearly: children's rooms, with built-in desks and reading nooks by the windows. Crime scene tape still hung from one doorframe, a reminder that this house had witnessed more than family dinners and homework sessions. Miguel had been working alone for 3 hours when he heard Sofia call from downstairs. "Papa, the bathroom floor sounds hollow." He found her in a half-bath near the kitchen, tapping her foot on the tile floor. "Listen," she said, demonstrating. The sound was definitely different from the solid thud in the rest of the room, a hollow echo that suggested empty space beneath. Miguel knelt and examined the tiles more closely. One section near the wall showed slight discoloration, as if it had been removed and replaced. He went to his truck for tools, his mind racing with possibilities. Old houses often had crawl spaces or utility access panels, but this felt different. Working carefully with a pry bar, Miguel lifted the loose tiles. Beneath them was a small wooden panel, and beneath that, a rectangular cavity lined with plastic sheeting. Inside the cavity was a manila envelope and several bundles of cash. Miguel's hands shook as he counted the money. $50,000 in hundreds, still crisp despite 2 years of hiding. The envelope contained documents, bank account numbers, safety deposit box keys, and a handwritten note in Spanish. "For the families who suffered because of Eduardo's choices, may God forgive us both. Elena." Sofia appeared in the doorway. "Papa, what did you find?" Miguel quickly covered the money with the envelope, his mind spinning. $50,000 was more than he made in 2 years of construction work. It could pay for all the repairs the house needed, could give his children security he'd never been able to provide. But the note changed everything. Elena Vasquez, Eduardo's wife, had hidden this money specifically for the families her husband had harmed. This wasn't treasure, it was restitution. "Papa?" Miguel looked up at his daughter, seeing his own moral struggle reflected in her concerned expression. "Come here, Mija. I need to show you something." He explained what he'd found, reading Elena's note aloud. Sofia listened without interruption, her face growing more thoughtful with each detail. "So she knew," Sofia said finally. "She knew what her husband was doing, and she tried to make it right. It looks that way. But she died before she could give the money to the families." Miguel nodded. 2 years ago, in a car accident. The newspaper said she was driving to San Antonio when it happened." Sofia knelt beside the hidden compartment, studying the careful way it had been constructed. She didn't just hide this randomly. Look how precisely it's cut, how well it's sealed. She planned this. And now we have to decide what to do with it. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of $50,000 and moral responsibility settling between them. Finally, Sophia spoke. What would Mama have done? Miguel had been asking himself the same question. Maria had worked as a seamstress for 15 years, often taking in extra work from neighbors who couldn't afford a tailor shop. She'd never kept a penny that wasn't rightfully hers, even when they desperately needed money. She would have found a way to give it to the families Elena intended to help, Miguel said quietly. Even if it meant we stayed poor. Especially then. Your mother believed that how you get your money matters as much as what you do with it. Sophia stood and walked to the window, looking out at the valley below. But Papa, Elena is dead. The families don't even know this money exists, and we need it so badly. Miguel heard the conflict in her voice, the same struggle he was feeling. $50,000 would transform their lives. They could fix the house properly. He could buy better tools for work. Sophia could attend college without crushing debt. There's something else, he said, studying Elena's note more carefully. These bank account numbers and safety deposit box keys, this might not be the only money she hid. Sophia turned back to him, eyes wide. You think there's more? Elena was married to Eduardo for 12 years. If she was planning to make restitution to families, and if Eduardo was stealing as much money as the federal investigation suggested, $50,000 would barely be a start. Miguel stood and began examining the bathroom more carefully, running his hands along the walls, checking for other hollow spaces. If Elena had hidden money once, she might have done it systematically throughout the house. We need to search the whole house, Sophia said, reading his thoughts. Yes, but carefully. And we need to think about what we're really doing here. Miguel looked at his daughter seriously. This isn't treasure hunting, Sophia. This is archaeological work trying to understand what Elena was planning and whether we can finish what she started. What about Carlos? Do we tell him? Miguel considered this. Carlos was 12, old enough to understand money problems but young enough to see $50,000 as a solution to everything. We tell him we found something that belonged to the previous owners and we're trying to figure out what to do with it. Nothing more until we understand the full situation. They heard Carlos calling from outside. He'd grown tired of waiting in the truck. Miguel quickly sealed the money back in its hiding place, covering it with the loose tiles. For now, this stays our secret, he told Sophia, until we decide what the right thing to do is. Sophia nodded, but Miguel could see the wheels turning in her mind. His 16-year-old daughter was already thinking like an adult, weighing moral complexity against practical need. As they left the bathroom, Miguel felt the weight of discovery settling on his shoulders. They'd come here to build a new life in Eduardo Vasquez's former home. Now they'd inherited not just his mansion, but the unfinished business of his widow's conscience. Outside, Carlos was throwing stones at a rusted basketball hoop, each shot clanging off the rim. This place is huge, Papa. Wait until Jimmy sees where we live now. Miguel watched his son's simple joy and felt the moral burden grow heavier. In Carlos's world, they now lived in a mansiona, step up from their cramped apartment that meant dignity and possibility. In Miguel's world, they were now custodians of secrets that could change multiple families' lives, including their own. Come on, Miguel called to both children. Let's go get our things. Tomorrow, we start making this place a home. But as they drove away, Miguel knew that home would have to be built on a foundation of truth, and truth, he was learning, was far more complicated than construction. 3 days later, Miguel and Sophia worked by lamplight in the master bedroom, carefully removing sections of wainscoting near the walk-in closet. They'd developed a system. Sophia tapped walls and floors, listening for hollow sounds, while Miguel checked the structural integrity before they opened anything. The children had moved into the mansion that weekend with sleeping bags and camping equipment, treating the whole experience like an adventure. Carlos had claimed the bedroom with built-in bookshelves, spending hours planning how he'd organize his comic books and model airplanes. Sophia chose the room with the window seat, already envisioning how it would look with curtains and her own furniture. Miguel tried to share their excitement, but the hidden money weighed on his conscience. Each night, he returned to the bathroom to check that the $50,000 was still there, untouched and waiting for a decision. Papa, this panel feels different, Sophia whispered, not wanting to wake Carlos down the hall. Miguel examined the section she indicated. Unlike the bathroom, this hiding spot was more sophisticated, a section of wall that swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a small safe built into the space between studs. "Do you think Elena built all these herself?" Sophia asked. "No, this is professional work. She must have hired someone." Miguel ran his fingers along the safe's edges. Someone she trusted completely. The safe was old-fashioned, with a combination dial rather than electronic locks. Miguel tried several obvious combinations: Eduardo's birthday, Elena's birthday, their wedding anniversary, but nothing worked. "Wait," Sophia said, pulling out her phone. "I've been researching Elena online. Look at this." She showed Miguel a newspaper article from 5 years earlier. Local teacher receives community service award. The photo showed Elena Vasquez presenting a check to St. Vincent's Children's Home, smiling genuinely as she shook hands with the director. "She was a teacher before she married Eduardo," Sophia continued. "She taught 3rd grade at Roosevelt Elementary for 8 years. The article says she started a weekend tutoring program for underprivileged children." Miguel studied the photo. Elena looked different from what he'd expected, younger, happier, with the patient smile of someone who genuinely enjoyed working with children. It was hard to reconcile this image with the woman who'd lived in fear of her husband's criminal empire. When did she stop teaching? According to this, she took a leave of absence right after she married Eduardo. She never went back. Sophia scrolled through more search results. But look at this, she kept volunteering with children's charities even after she married him. Food drives, school supply donations, holiday toy collections. Miguel felt a growing respect for Elena Vasquez. She'd tried to maintain her moral center even while living with corruption, using Eduardo's money for genuine good works, even as she knew how he'd earned it. "Try the date of her teaching award," Sophia suggested. Miguel entered the numbers from the newspaper article. The safe clicked open. Inside was a leather journal. More cash this time, nearly $50,000, in various denominations, and a collection of documents that made Miguel's breath catch. Bank statements showing dozens of accounts, real estate deeds for properties he'd never heard of, and a detailed handwritten list of names and amounts. Sophia picked up the journal and opened to the first page. "Oh my God, Papa, listen to this." She read aloud. "I cannot undo what Eduardo has done, but I can try to return what was stolen. Each family on this list lost something because of my husband's crimes money, businesses, loved ones. I have spent 3 years mapping his transactions, identifying his victims, calculating what justice would look like if I had the courage to face it." Miguel took the journal and continued reading. Elena's handwriting grew more urgent as the entries progressed. "Eduardo suspects nothing. He believes I'm simply managing household expenses, but I'm actually documenting everything. Every dirty transaction, every threat, every family destroyed for his profit. The FBI investigation will reveal some of this, but not all. Too many victims will never see justice unless I act." The final entry was dated just 2 weeks before Elena's death. "I can't wait any longer. Eduardo's behavior is becoming more erratic, and I fear for my safety. I've hidden everything throughout the house: money, documents, evidence. If something happens to me, perhaps someday someone with a conscience will find what I've left behind and finish what I couldn't." Sophia sat back on her heels, overwhelmed. She was planning to turn evidence against her own husband, and someone killed her for it. Miguel studied the list of names and amounts. Some families were to receive a few $1,000s, others much more. The total came to over $15 million. $15 million? Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Miguel did the math again, but the numbers didn't change. Elena had mapped out a restitution plan that would require far more money than they'd found so far. "Where would she have hidden that much money?" Sophia asked. Miguel looked around the master bedroom with new eyes. If Elena had been this systematic about documenting Eduardo's crimes, she would have been equally methodical about hiding the stolen money. This wasn't random, it was planned down to the detail. "We need to read everything," Miguel said, gathering the documents. "Elena left us a treasure map, but the treasure isn't meant for us." They spent the next 2 hours studying Elena's notes. Her system was brilliant. She'd used Eduardo's own arrogance against him. While he thought she was the naive teacher he'd married, she was actually building a complete record of his criminal empire. The journal revealed that Elena had been in contact with Father Rodriguez at St. Mary's Catholic Church, confessing her situation and seeking guidance about how to make amends. The priest had encouraged her to contact the FBI, but Elena feared for her life if Eduardo discovered her plans. "Look at this entry," Sophia said, pointing to a page dated 6 months before Elena's death. She writes about a main vault somewhere in the house, where Eduardo kept the bulk of his stolen money. She says she found it but didn't dare touch it while he was alive. Miguel felt his pulse quicken. "Does she say where?" "She's cryptic about it. Listen, he thinks his secret is safe beneath our foundation, but foundation can mean many things. The foundation of a house, the foundation of a marriage, the foundation of trust. I pray that someday someone will understand what I cannot say directly." "Beneath the foundation," Miguel repeated. "The basement? We haven't really explored down there yet." Miguel gathered Elena's documents carefully. "Tomorrow, after Carlos goes to school, we search the basement. But Sophia," he looked at his daughter seriously, "we're not treasure hunters anymore. We're trying to solve a murder and complete a mission of redemption. Are you ready for that responsibility?" Sophia met his gaze steadily. "Mama always said that doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it." Miguel smiled, seeing Maria's wisdom reflected in their daughter. "Then tomorrow we see how deep Elena's secrets go." As they sealed the safe and replaced the wall panel, Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by neighbors or police, but by Elena herself, a woman who died trying to right her husband's wrongs and who'd somehow chosen the Santos family to finish her work. Outside, wind rattled the windows of their new home, and Miguel wondered if they were strong enough to bear the weight of Elena's unfinished redemption. The basement of the Vasquez mansion was nothing like the upper floors. Where the main house showcased Eduardo's expensive tastes, the basement was purely functional concrete floors, exposed ceiling beams, and the familiar smell of old dampness that reminded Miguel of construction sites. Carlos had discovered this level 2 days earlier while exploring, announcing proudly that he'd found the perfect workshop space for his father. Miguel had nodded and made encouraging sounds, but now he studied the basement with different eyes, searching for Elena's final secret. The space was divided into several rooms, a furnace room, storage areas, and what had clearly been Eduardo's personal office. Unlike the sanitized upper floors, this office had been left largely intact. The FBI had apparently focused their search on more obvious locations. "This is where he really worked," Sophia observed, examining a wall covered with maps of Mexico and the southwestern United States. Red pins marked cities along the border, connected by colored string that suggested trafficking routes. Miguel found Eduardo's desk a massive oak piece that looked like it weighed half a ton. The drawers had been searched and left open, but Miguel examined the desk itself more carefully. Elena's journal entry about "beneath our foundation" suggested she'd been literal about location. "Help me move this," Miguel said, motioning Sophia to one end of the desk. It took both of them straining to shift the heavy furniture, revealing scratches in the concrete floor, evidence that the desk had been moved regularly. Beneath where it had sat, Miguel found what he was looking for, a section of concrete that had been cut and replaced, the edges sealed with cork, but still visible to someone who knew what to look for. "Papa, look at this." Sophia was examining a metal filing cabinet against the far wall. "This isn't just a filing cabinet, it's a safe." Miguel joined her, studying the deceptively simple-looking cabinet. What appeared to be a standard office fixture was actually a sophisticated safe designed to look ordinary. The lock was hidden behind a false front panel. "Elena was smarter than her husband gave her credit for," Miguel said admiringly. "Eduardo hid his main vault in the floor where anyone searching would eventually find it. Elena hid her evidence in plain sight." Using tools from his truck, Miguel carefully opened the floor vault first. The concrete came up in carefully cut sections, revealing a steel-lined chamber about the size of a coffin. Inside were dozens of waterproof containers, each labeled with Elena's careful handwriting. The first container held $2 million in cash. The second contained financial documents detailing Eduardo's money laundering operations. The third held photographs and recordings evidence that would have destroyed not just Eduardo, but dozens of corrupt officials who'd worked with him. "How much money is down here?" Sophia asked, her voice hushed with awe. Miguel continued opening containers methodically. The amount staggered him. 5 million, 8 million, 12 million. By the time he'd opened everything, they were looking at over $20 million in cash, plus evidence that could have brought down an entire criminal network. Eduardo stole even more than the FBI investigation revealed, Miguel said, studying Elena's documentation. She tracked every transaction, every bribe, every stolen dollar. This isn't just restitution money, it's evidence of the biggest criminal conspiracy in the state's history. Sophia opened the disguised filing cabinet safe using a combination they found in Elena's journal. Inside were more documents, but these were different personal letters, photographs, and a manila envelope marked, "For whoever finds this." Miguel opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter in Elena's handwriting, dated 1 week before her death. "To whoever discovers my secrets, my name is Elena Vasquez, and I am a coward who married a monster. For 12 years, I lived with the knowledge that my husband destroyed families, ended lives, and corrupted everything he touched. I told myself I couldn't leave because I feared for my life, but the truth is I was afraid of losing the comfortable life his crimes provided. When I finally found the courage to act, it was too late for many of his victims, but not too late for justice. Hidden throughout this house is evidence of Eduardo's crimes and money stolen from our community. I have documented everything, every victim, every theft, every crime that can still be made right. I know Eduardo suspects my activities. I know I may not live to complete my mission. If you are reading this, I am probably dead, and that means Eduardo can no longer hurt anyone. But it also means the victims of his crimes will never receive justice unless someone continues what I started. I have left detailed instructions for distributing this money to the families Eduardo harmed. I pray that whoever finds this has the moral courage I lacked for so many years. The money belongs to the victims. The evidence belongs to history. Use both wisely. If you choose to keep this money for yourself, I cannot stop you. But I can ask you to remember that every dollar was paid for with someone else's suffering. Do better than I did. Be braver than I was. May God forgive us all. Elena Vasquez." Miguel finished reading and set the letter down carefully. Beside him, Sophia wiped tears from her eyes. "She wasn't a coward," Sophia said quietly. "She was terrified, but she did it anyway." Miguel looked around the basement the millions of dollars in cash, the evidence that could still bring justice to corrupt officials, and the detailed list of families waiting for restitution they didn't know existed. "What do we do, Papa?" Before Miguel could answer, they heard footsteps on the basement stairs. Both of them froze. Then Miguel quickly began closing the floor vault. They'd left Carlos upstairs doing homework, but the footsteps were too heavy to be his. "Mr. Santos," an unfamiliar voice called down the stairs. Miguel motioned for Sophia to stay quiet and walked to the bottom of the staircase. A woman in a police uniform stood halfway down the steps. Detective Rosa Martinez, according to her badge. "Detective Martinez," Miguel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is there a problem?" "I hope not, Mr. Santos. May I come down? I have some questions about the property." Miguel glanced back at Sophia, who had managed to close the filing cabinet safe. The floor vault was sealed, and Eduardo's desk was back in place, but Miguel's heart was still racing. "Of course, Detective. Though I'm not sure what I can tell you, we just moved in a few days ago." Detective Martinez descended the remaining steps and looked around the basement with professional interest. She was middle-aged, with graying hair and the careful eyes of someone who'd seen too much. I'm investigating some irregularities related to the federal seizure of this property, she said. There were reports of unusual activity here recently, lights on at night, vehicles coming and going. The neighbors are concerned. We're living here now, Miguel said simply. My children and I are renovating the house. That probably explains the lights and activity. Probably. Detective Martinez walked around the basement, her gaze lingering on Eduardo's maps and the scratches in the floor where the desk had been moved. Mr. Santos, are you aware of the full history of this property? I know Eduardo Vasquez was a criminal who was killed by his associates. I know the federal government seized the house. I bought it at a legitimate auction. And you're not concerned about living where such violence occurred? Miguel met her gaze steadily. Detective, I'm a construction worker with 2 children who needed a real home. This house was the only one I could afford. Whatever happened here before doesn't change what it can become now. Detective Martinez nodded slowly. That's an admirable perspective, Mr. Santos. I hope you're right. She handed him a business card. If you find anything unusual while you're renovating, anything that might be related to Eduardo Vasquez's activities, please call me immediately. Of course, Miguel said, taking the card. After the detective left, Miguel and Sofia sat in Eduardo's former office, surrounded by the weight of $20 million and the responsibility Elena had placed on their shoulders. She knows something, Sofia said quietly. Miguel nodded. The question is she hunting for evidence, or is she hunting for the money? Either way, their time for making decisions was running out. 2 weeks after Detective Martinez's visit, Miguel sat in the Riverside Public Library, surrounded by old newspapers and police reports. He told his children he was researching renovation techniques, but he was actually learning everything he could about Eduardo Vasquez's criminal empire and its victims. The truth was more devastating than Elena's journal had indicated. Eduardo hadn't just been a drug trafficker, he'd been a predator who systematically destroyed anyone who stood in his way. The Morales family had lost their restaurant when they refused to launder money. The Herrera family's teenage son had been killed for witnessing a drug deal. Mrs. Chen's grocery store had been burned down when she couldn't pay protection money. Miguel recognized some of the names from Elena's restitution list. These weren't faceless victims, they were his neighbors, people who shopped at the same stores, whose children attended the same schools as Sofia and Carlos. Finding everything you need. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, appeared beside his table with a concerned expression. Yes, thank you. Miguel began gathering the papers. He'd been coming here every day for a week, and Mrs. Patterson had started watching him with curiosity. You're researching the Vasquez case? She asked quietly. That was a dark time for our community. Eduardo hurt a lot of good families. Miguel nodded. I'm trying to understand what happened. I bought the Vasquez house, and people keep telling me stories about the things that went on there. Mrs. Patterson sat down across from him. I knew Elena Vasquez when she was Elena Moreno. She was a wonderful teacher patient, kind, genuinely cared about her students. When she married Eduardo, a lot of us were surprised. He wasn't the type of man we'd expected her to choose. What was he like before? Miguel searched for the right words. Before people knew what he really was. Charming, generous. He donated money to the school district, sponsored Little League teams, showed up at community events. If you didn't look too closely, he seemed like a successful businessman who cared about the community. Miguel thought about the contrast between Eduardo's public persona and the evidence he'd found in the basement. And Elena, how did she change after they married? She withdrew. Stopped volunteering as much, stopped attending social events. We all assumed she was just adjusting to married life. But looking back, Mrs. Patterson shook her head sadly. I think she was scared and ashamed. Miguel pulled out Elena's photograph from the newspaper article about her teaching award. Mrs. Patterson, I've found this picture of Elena. Do you know anything about her work with children's charities? Mrs. Patterson's face softened. Elena never stopped caring about children, even after she married Eduardo. She couldn't teach anymore. Eduardo didn't want her working, but she found other ways to help. Anonymous donations, supply drives, sponsoring families at Christmas. She did it quietly, almost secretly. Secretly? Elena would show up at the school with boxes of supplies or checks for families in need, but she'd always ask us not to mention her name. She said she preferred to help without recognition. Mrs. Patterson paused. Now I wonder if she was afraid Eduardo would find out and stop her. Miguel felt a growing understanding of Elena's complexity. She'd lived a double life publicly, the wife of a criminal, privately trying to atone for his crimes even before she'd found the courage to actively oppose him. Mrs. Patterson, do you know what happened to Elena's family after she died? Did she have relatives who might have known about her activities? Elena was an only child, and her parents died years ago. As far as I know, she didn't have close family. Mrs. Patterson studied Miguel's face. Why are you really researching this, Mr. Santos? People don't usually dig this deep into a property's history, unless there's a specific reason. Miguel made a decision. I think Elena left something behind. Something meant to help the families Eduardo hurt. I'm trying to understand what she wanted to accomplish. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. You found something, didn't you? Miguel nodded carefully. I found evidence that Elena was planning to make restitution to Eduardo's victims, but I'm not sure how to proceed without making things worse for everyone involved. What kind of evidence? Miguel pulled out a photocopy of Elena's victim list, with the monetary amounts removed. Names of families, documentation of what they lost, plans for helping them recover. Mrs. Patterson studied the list, her expression growing more emotional with each name. The Herrera family, their boy Miguel was only 17 when Eduardo's people killed him. Chen never reopened her store after the fire. The Morales family moved away after they lost everything. She looked up at Miguel. These people never got justice. The criminal case focused on Eduardo's drug trafficking, not on the individual families he destroyed. Elena documented everything, Miguel said quietly. She knew exactly how much each family lost, and she was planning to compensate them. But she died before she could do it. Yes, and now I have to decide whether to continue her work or let it die with her. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Santos, Elena Vasquez was a good woman trapped in an impossible situation. If she found a way to help these families, even after death, that would be a miracle they deserve. Miguel gathered his research materials. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. You've helped me understand Elena better. Mr. Santos? She touched his arm as he stood to leave. Be careful. Eduardo may be dead, but some of the people who worked with him are still alive. If they think there's money or evidence hidden in that house, they might come looking for it. Driving home, Miguel felt the weight of Elena's mission settling more heavily on his shoulders. At home, he found Sofia helping Carlos with homework at the kitchen table, the same massive oak table they'd moved from Eduardo's basement office and refinished for their dining room. How was your research? Sofia asked, not looking up from Carlos's math problems. Educational, Miguel replied. I learned that Elena helped a lot of families, even while Eduardo was alive. Anonymously, quietly, but consistently. Carlos looked up from his homework. Sofia told me about Elena, the lady who used to live here before us. Miguel glanced at Sofia, who gave a slight nod. They'd agreed to tell Carlos age-appropriate versions of the truth as needed. What did Sofia tell you? That Elena was trying to help people, but she died before she could finish, and that maybe we can help finish what she started. Carlos returned to his math. I think that's good. Mama always said we should help people when we can. Miguel sat down beside his children, looking around their transformed kitchen. In the 2 weeks since Detective Martinez's visit, they'd made remarkable progress on the house. Miguel had repaired the damaged windows. Sofia had organized a successful effort to remove the graffiti from the exterior walls, and Carlos had convinced his new friends to help with yard work. The mansion was becoming a home, but it was also becoming something LC monument to Elena's unfinished redemption. Every repair they made, every improvement they added, felt like preparation for a larger purpose. Papa, Sofia said quietly, I've been thinking about Elena's list. Some of those families still live here. Mrs. Chen works at the grocery store on 5th Street now. The Morales family moved back last year. Their daughter is in my chemistry class. Miguel understood what she was suggesting. You want to start reaching out to them? Not about the money. Not yet, but maybe we can learn more about what they need, what would really help them. Miguel looked at both his children, Sofia, 16 and already thinking like a social worker, and Carlos, 12 and convinced that helping people was simply what good families do. All right, he said finally, but we go slowly, and we're careful about who we trust. Elena died trying to do the right thing. We're not going to let the same thing happen to us. 1 month into their life at the mansion, Miguel found Maria's unfinished letter in the most unexpected place, tucked inside a cookbook that had somehow been left behind in the kitchen. The discovery shook him more than all of Elena's hidden money combined. He'd been searching for a spare electrical outlet behind the built-in cookbook shelf when the slim volume fell open in his hands. There, pressed between pages about holiday meal preparation, was Maria's familiar handwriting on hospital stationery. My dearest Miguel, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are facing the hardest job in the world, raising our children alone. Miguel sank into a kitchen chair, his hands trembling as he continued reading. I know you will blame yourself for not being able to save me, but I need you to understand something important. You gave me the greatest gift possible. You loved me exactly as I was, and you showed our children what a good man looks like. That is worth more than any house, any amount of money, any material success. But I also know you dream of giving Sofia and Carlos more than we could afford. When opportunities come, and they will come, don't let fear or false modesty stop you from taking them. Sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be, even when we don't understand why. The letter ended there, incomplete, but Miguel felt Maria's presence as strongly as if she were sitting beside him. He looked around the renovated kitchen, granite countertops gleaming, new appliances humming quietly, windows overlooking the valley where his children played with neighborhood kids who no longer saw them as outsiders. Papa? Sofia appeared in the doorway, her chemistry textbook under her arm. Are you all right? Miguel showed her the letter, watching her face change as she read Maria's words. She knew, didn't she? Sofia said quietly. Somehow, she knew we'd end up somewhere like this. Your mother was wise about people, Miguel replied. Maybe she understood that taking care of others is how we take care of ourselves. Sofia set down her textbook and sat across from him. I talked to Ana Morales at school today. Her family, they're struggling. Her dad got hurt at his construction job and can't work. They might lose their apartment. Miguel had been expecting this conversation. Sofia had been carefully building relationships with the families on Elena's list, not mentioning the hidden money but learning about their current situations. What did you tell her? Nothing about Elena or the money, but I told her my dad was a construction foreman who might know about job opportunities. Sofia met his eyes. Papa, Anna's family is on Elena's list for $50,000. Her father, Roberto, owned a small trucking business before Eduardo forced him out. The family never recovered. Miguel folded Maria's letter carefully, and now Roberto can't work because of an injury. Ana says they have enough savings for maybe 2 more months of rent. After that, Sofia shrugged helplessly. Miguel walked to the window overlooking the front yard, where Carlos was teaching 3 neighborhood children how to throw a football. In the distance, he could see Mrs. Chen walking home from her shift at the grocery store, moving slowly in the heat. Sofia, there's something I need to tell you about Detective Martinez. His daughter's attention sharpened. What about her? I've been thinking about her visit. She wasn't just checking on neighborhood complaints. She knew too much about the house, about Eduardo's operations. I think she was part of the original investigation. So she might know about Elena's plans? She might know Elena was planning something, but not what or where. Miguel turned back to Sofia. The question is whether we can trust her to help us, or whether involving law enforcement will complicate Elena's mission. Sofia considered this. What if we're thinking about this wrong? What if Elena expected someone like Detective Martinez to be involved? She left all that evidence about corrupt officials. Maybe she was planning to work with honest cops. Miguel felt a spark of possibility. Elena had been methodical about everything, else perhaps she'd considered the law enforcement angle as well. "There's only one way to find out," he said, "but first, we need to help the Morales family. Not because of Elena's list, but because it's the right thing to do." That evening, Miguel drove to Roberto Morales' apartment building, a rundown complex on the east side of town. He found Roberto sitting on his front steps, his right leg in a cast, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. "Roberto, I'm Miguel Santos. My daughter Sofia goes to school with Anna." Roberto looked up, his face guarded. Men in their neighborhood didn't usually make social calls about their children's school friendships. "I heard about your injury," Miguel continued. "I'm a construction foreman, and I'm starting some renovation projects that could use someone with trucking experience. Supervisory work, mostly nothing that would stress your leg." Roberto's expression shifted from suspicion to cautious hope. "What kind of projects?" "Residential renovations. I've got several houses lined up, and I need someone who understands logistics, coordinating deliveries, managing supplies, scheduling contractors." Miguel had spent the afternoon creating legitimate work that Roberto could actually do. "The pay is $25 an hour, and you could work from home most of the time." "25 an hour?" Roberto's voice cracked slightly. "That's more than I made driving truck." "Good supervisors are worth paying well." Miguel handed him a business card he'd had printed that morning. "Santos Construction and Renovation. Call me tomorrow if you're interested, and we can discuss the details." As Miguel drove home, he felt Maria's presence again, approving of his decision to help Roberto as an employer rather than a charity case. This was how Elena's mission could work, not as handouts that created dependence, but as opportunities that restored dignity. At home, he found Sofia on the phone with Detective Martinez. "Yes, Detective, he just got home," Sofia was saying. "Papa, Detective Martinez would like to speak with you." Miguel took the phone, his heart rate increasing. "Detective Martinez?" "Mr. Santos, I need to meet with you as soon as possible. There have been some developments in the Vasquez case that affect your family's safety. Can you come to the station tonight?" Miguel looked at Sofia, who was listening intently. "What kind of developments?" "The kind best discussed in person. Mr. Santos, I believe Elena Vasquez left something behind that certain people are very interested in finding. If I'm right, your family may be in danger." Miguel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Elena's secrets pressing down on him. "I'll be there in an hour." After hanging up, Sofia looked at him with worry and determination mixed in her expression. "Whatever Detective Martinez knows, we face it together, right?" Miguel nodded, but he was already planning how to protect his children if Elena's past caught up with them. They'd found more than hidden money in that mansion. They'd inherited a war between justice and corruption that had already claimed Elena's life. The question now was whether they were strong enough to finish what she'd started, or whether her redemption would cost them everything they'd built. The police station felt different at night, harsher fluorescent lighting, fewer people, the kind of institutional quiet that made every sound echo. Detective Martinez led Miguel to a small conference room where a man in an expensive suit was waiting with a manila folder. "Mr. Santos, this is Agent David Chen with the FBI. We need to show you something." Agent Chen opened the folder and pulled out a death certificate and autopsy report. "Eduardo Vasquez, cause of death, 3 gunshot wounds to the chest, 1 to the head, professional execution." Miguel studied the documents, confused. "I thought Eduardo died in a drug deal gone wrong, gang violence." "That's what we let people believe," Detective Martinez said. "The truth is more complicated. Eduardo was killed by his own cartel associates, but not for the reasons you might think." Agent Chen pulled out another document, a financial audit report. 3 months before his death, Eduardo's partners discovered he'd been systematically stealing from their operations. Not just skimming profits, but redirecting entire shipments, emptying bank accounts, transferring assets to accounts they couldn't access. "How much did he steal?" Miguel asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Conservatively, $40 million, possibly more." Agent Chen leaned forward. The cartel spent 2 years after Eduardo's death searching for that money. They never found it. Detective Martinez placed a photograph on the table, Elena Vasquez, leaving a bank with a large envelope. Elena wasn't just Eduardo's wife. She was his unwitting accountant. Eduardo used her teaching background and trustworthy appearance to manage his legitimate business fronts. He thought she was too naive to understand what she was really doing. But she figured it out, Miguel said. More than figured it out. She kept copies of everything, every transaction, every account number, every crime Eduardo committed. Agent Chen pulled out more photographs, showing Elena meeting with various people. 6 months before Eduardo's death, Elena contacted the FBI. She wanted to make a deal. Miguel felt the room spinning slightly. Elena was an FBI informant? She was trying to become one, Detective Martinez corrected. She approached us with evidence of Eduardo's crimes and offered to help us build a case against him and his associates. In exchange, she wanted immunity and protection for herself. But Eduardo was killed before she could testify. Eduardo was killed because his partners found out about Elena's contact with the FBI, Agent Chen said grimly. Someone leaked information about our investigation. Detective Martinez placed another document on the table, Elena's second autopsy report. Elena Vasquez didn't die in a random car accident, Mr. Santos. Her brake lines were cut. She was murdered 3 days after Eduardo, probably by the same people. Miguel stared at the autopsy report, Elena's death certificate suddenly taking on new meaning. They killed her to stop her from testifying. They killed her because they thought she knew where Eduardo hid the stolen money. Agent Chen corrected. But Elena died before she could tell us anything. The case went cold, the money disappeared, and Eduardo's partners eventually moved their operations to other states. Until now, Detective Martinez added quietly. Miguel looked up sharply. What do you mean, until now? Agent Chen opened another folder. 2 weeks ago, our surveillance equipment picked up chatter about renewed activity in your area. Someone believes the missing money is still here, hidden in Eduardo's former property. You think Eduardo's old associates are coming back? We know they're coming back. The question is whether they think you've found something or whether they plan to search the property themselves. Miguel felt a chill run down his spine. How do they even know I exist? Detective Martinez pulled out a surveillance photo, Miguel and Sofia entering the library, Miguel leaving the bank, Miguel talking to Roberto Morales. You've been asking questions, Mr. Santos, researching Eduardo's crimes, reaching out to his victims. In a small community, that kind of activity gets noticed. And reported, Agent Chen added. We have reason to believe someone has been monitoring your activities and reporting back to Eduardo's former associates. Miguel thought about the neighbors who'd watched them move in, the construction workers who'd commented on his renovation projects, the librarians and bank employees who'd helped with his research. Any of them could have been reporting to someone else. What do you want from me? Miguel asked. We want to know what you've found, Detective Martinez said directly. Mr. Santos, we know Elena hid something in that house. Her phone records show she made dozens of calls to contractors and security companies in the weeks before her death. Bank records show large cash withdrawals that were never accounted for. She was preparing something. Miguel sat back in his chair, weighing his options. These federal agents clearly suspected he'd found Elena's hidden money, but they didn't know for certain. He could deny everything, claim ignorance, and hope they'd leave his family alone. Or he could trust them with the truth and hope they'd help him complete Elena's mission. If I had found something, Miguel said carefully, what would happen to it? Agent Chen and Detective Martinez exchanged glances. That would depend on what it is, Agent Chen said. Evidence of crimes would be used to prosecute the remaining members of Eduardo's organization. Stolen money would need to be returned to its rightful owners. And if the rightful owners couldn't be identified, asset forfeiture laws are complicated, Detective Martinez admitted. But if Elena left specific instructions about how stolen money should be distributed, and if those instructions serve the interests of justice, the FBI has some discretion in how we handle the situation. Miguel made his decision. Elena left detailed records of Eduardo's crimes and a complete plan for compensating his victims. She hid evidence and money throughout the house, along with instructions for distributing restitution to specific families. Agent Chen leaned forward intently. How much money? Over $20 million, plus evidence that could still be used to prosecute corrupt officials who worked with Eduardo. Detective Martinez whistled softly. Elena documented the whole network. Everything, bank accounts, property transactions, bribes, violences, he kept records of all of it. Miguel pulled out Elena's letter from his jacket pocket. She knew she was going to be killed. She planned for someone else to finish what she couldn't. Agent Chen took the letter and read it quickly. Mr. Santos, this changes everything. With Elena's evidence and the money, we can finally bring justice to Eduardo's victims and prosecute the corrupt officials who helped him. But first, we need to keep your family safe, Detective Martinez added. If Eduardo's associates believe you found their money, they'll come for you. These aren't people who negotiate or show mercy. Miguel thought about Sofia and Carlos probably doing homework at the kitchen table in their beautiful new home, unaware that their lives had just become infinitely more dangerous. What kind of protection can you offer? Full federal witness protection if necessary, Agent Chen said. New identities, relocation, complete security. But that would mean leaving the house, leaving your community, starting over somewhere else. Miguel shook his head immediately. That's not an option. This house isn't just our home, it's Elena's monument. She died trying to help these families. I won't abandon that mission to save myself. Then we'll have to catch Eduardo's associates before they can hurt you, Detective Martinez said, and we'll need your help to do it. Agent Chen pulled out a recording device. We want you to continue your normal activities, but we'll be monitoring everything. When Eduardo's people make contact, and they will make contact, we'll be ready. Miguel stared at the recording device, understanding that accepting it meant crossing a line from which there was no return. Elena had crossed the same line and died for it. But she'd also created the possibility for justice that had been waiting 2 years for someone brave enough to complete it. My children will be protected, Detective Martinez promised. Around-the-clock surveillance, unmarked agents at their school, the full resources of federal law enforcement. But Miguel, you need to understand once we start this operation, there's no backing out. Eduardo's people will know you're working with us, and they'll see you as a threat that needs to be eliminated. Miguel thought about Maria's letter, about her faith that opportunities would come and her confidence that he would have the courage to take them. This wasn't the opportunity she'd imagined, but it was the one Elena had prepared for him. How long before they make contact? Based on the intelligence we've received, probably within the next week. Agent Chen handed him the recording device. Are you ready to finish what Elena started? Miguel pocketed the device, feeling its weight like a sacred responsibility. Elena died trying to make things right. If I can help catch the people who killed her and get justice for Eduardo's victims, then yes, I'm ready. As he drove home through empty streets, Miguel realized that buying Eduardo Vasquez's mansion had been more than a real estate transaction. It had been a calling to complete a dead woman's mission of redemption and to prove that sometimes ordinary people have the courage to do extraordinary things, even when it puts their own lives at risk. Miguel found Elena's final video message 3 days after his meeting with the FBI, hidden inside a hollowed-out cookbook in the same kitchen where he'd discovered Maria's letter. The video was stored on a small digital camera, and Elena had recorded it the night before her death. Watching Elena speak directly to him from beyond the grave was more unsettling than reading her written words. She sat in the mansion's study, looking tired but resolute, speaking in the calm voice of someone who'd accepted her fate. If you are watching this, I am dead, and Eduardo is probably dead too. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I need your help to finish something I couldn't complete while I was alive. Eleanor explained her systematic documentation of Eduardo's crimes, her contact with the FBI, and her growing certainty that she would be killed before she could testify. But the most crucial part came at the end. I know Eduardo's associates will eventually come looking for the money. They are violent men who will hurt innocent people to get what they want. But I have prepared a trap for Thema, way to get them to confess their crimes while thinking they are recovering Eduardo's stolen money. The video included detailed instructions for a plan Elena had developed with her FBI contactor plan that would use the hidden money as bait to draw out Eduardo's killers and record their confessions. She'd even identified the specific evidence needed to prosecute the corrupt officials who'd helped Eduardo's organization. I pray that whoever finds this has the moral courage to complete what I started. But I also pray that they are smarter than I was smart enough to stay alive long enough to see justice done. Miguel called Detective Martinez immediately. Within 2 hours, she and Agent Chen were in his kitchen, watching Elena's video with expressions of amazement and grief. She planned all of this before she died, Agent Chen said, shaking his head. Elena wasn't just gathering evidences, he was setting up a sting operation. But she needed someone else to execute it, Detective Martinez added. Someone the cartel wouldn't suspect, someone they'd underestimate. Miguel looked around his renovated kitchen, thinking about how much his family's life had changed in just 2 months. She chose us before we even knew we were chosen. Agent Chen studied Elena's written instructions. This plan could work, Miguel. Elena identified the key players who are still alive, the evidence needed to prosecute them, and the exact confession we'd need to make charges stick. But it's extremely dangerous. How dangerous? These men killed Eduardo and Elena. They've killed dozens of other people who stood in their way. If they realize you're recording them, they'll kill you without hesitation. Miguel thought about Sofia and Carlos, asleep upstairs in their beautiful bedrooms, finally feeling secure in a real home. What about my children? They'll be safe, Detective Martinez promised. We'll relocate them to a secure location during the operation. Sofia and Carlos won't be anywhere near the danger. That evening, Miguel called a family meeting in the living room. He explained as much as he could, without terrifying his children, that Elena had left evidence about crimes that were never prosecuted, that Miguel was going to help the FBI catch the people responsible, and that Sofia and Carlos would need to stay with their Aunt Carmen for a few days while it happened. "Papa, are you going to be in danger?" Sofia asked directly. Miguel considered lying, but his children had lived through too much already to be sheltered from hard truths. "Yes, there's danger, but Detective Martinez and Agent Chen will be there to protect me. And Sofia, this is what Elena died trying to accomplish. If we don't finish it, her death was meaningless." Carlos, now almost 13 and taller than he'd been when they moved to the mansion, spoke with surprising maturity. "If you help catch the bad guys, will the families Elena wanted to help finally get their money?" "That's the plan." "Then you have to do it," Carlos said simply. "Even if it's scary. Mama always said doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy." Sofia nodded agreement. "But Papa, promise you'll be careful. We can't lose you too." Miguel gathered both children in his arms, holding them close in the living room that had once been Eduardo's entertainment space, but was now filled with their family's love and memories. "I promise I'll be as careful as possible, and I promise that when this is over, we'll finish turning this house into the home your mother dreamed about." The next morning, Miguel drove Sofia and Carlos to Carmen's house in the next town, along with enough clothes and schoolbooks for a week. Carmen asked no questions she'd learned years ago to trust Miguel's judgment about protecting the children. "Call me every day," Sofia insisted as she hugged him goodbye. "And bring us something from Elena's treasure when you catch the bad guys," Carlos added, making Miguel smile despite his anxiety. Driving back to the mansion alone, Miguel felt the weight of Elena's mission settling fully on his shoulders. The house that had once seemed too big for his small family now felt cavernous and echoing, filled with secrets and the ghosts of 2 women who'd shaped his family's destiny. Agent Chen had installed sophisticated recording equipment throughout the house, particularly in Eduardo's former basement office, where Elena's plan called for the confrontation to take place. Miguel spent the afternoon memorizing his role. Was to play the part of a construction worker who'd stumbled across Eduardo's hidden money and was willing to sell information about its location. Remember, Detective Martinez coached him. They need to believe you're motivated by greed, not justice. Let them think you're just a working man who wants to profit from Eduardo's secrets. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Miguel would receive a phone call from Eduardo's associates, demanding to meet about items of mutual interest found in the house. He would play nervous but greedy, agreeing to sell information about the money's location in exchange for a percentage of the recovery. The meeting would take place in the basement, where Elena had hidden the bulk of Eduardo's stolen money. Miguel would show them some of the cash to prove he'd found Eduardo's stash, then negotiate for his share. All the while, FBI recording equipment would capture their confession to killing Eduardo and Elena. The key moment will come when they think they're safe, Agent Chen explained. When they believe they've recovered Eduardo's money and eliminated the threat you represent, that's when they'll talk about what they did to Eduardo and Elena. Miguel spent that evening walking through the house, touching the things that had made it a home: Sophia's books on the window seat, Carlos's model airplanes on his desk, the family photos on the mantelpiece. If something went wrong tomorrow, he wanted to remember his children's happiness in this place. He ended up in the kitchen, holding Maria's unfinished letter and looking at Elena's cookbook, where the video camera had been hidden. Two women, both dead, both trying to protect their families and do what was right. Tomorrow, he would find out if their sacrifices had been enough to achieve justice. The phone call came at 9:47 p.m. Miguel Santos? The voice was heavily accented, professionally calm. Yes. We understand you have found some items that belong to Eduardo Vasquez, items that should be returned to their rightful owners. Miguel's mouth went dry, but he forced himself to sound nervous and greedy rather than terrified. I might have found some things. Depends on what you're offering. We are offering you the chance to profit from your discovery rather than losing everything you have built. Do you understand? The threat was clear: cooperate or die. I understand. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, you will meet us at the house. Come alone, bring proof of what you have found, and we will discuss terms. The line went dead. Miguel immediately called Detective Martinez. They took the bait, he reported. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Are you ready for this? Miguel looked around the kitchen where he'd found Elena's final message, where he'd read Maria's words of encouragement, where his children had eaten breakfast that morning before leaving for their aunt's house. Elena was ready to die for this, he said quietly. I can be ready to live for it. 24 hours later, Miguel would discover whether a construction worker and a dead woman's carefully planned revenge could bring down a criminal organization that had evaded justice for years. But tonight, he sat in Elena's former home, surrounded by the evidence of her preparation and the weight of her trust, preparing to risk everything to complete a mission that had begun with love and would end with justice one way or another. At exactly 8 o'clock, two black SUVs pulled up to the mansion's front gate. Miguel watched from the kitchen window as four men got out, all wearing expensive suits, all moving with the controlled precision of professional killers. He recognized the leader from FBI surveillance photos, Victor Ruiz, Eduardo's former second-in-command, and the man suspected of ordering both Eduardo's and Elena's murders. Miguel's hands shook as he activated the wire recording device Agent Chen had hidden beneath his shirt. Somewhere in the darkness beyond his property line, a dozen FBI agents waited for his signal, but for the next hour he would be completely alone with men who'd killed without hesitation. The doorbell rang. Miguel took a deep breath, whispered a prayer to Maria and Elena, and opened the door. Mr. Santos. Victor Ruiz stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his cold eyes scanning the renovated foyer. You have made impressive improvements to Eduardo's house. It needed work, Miguel replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Everything needs work when it's been abandoned. The other three men spread out through the ground floor, clearly searching for threats or surveillance equipment. Miguel's heart pounded as he remembered Agent Chen's warnings about their professionalisms. These weren't street thugs, but experienced criminals who'd survived years of law enforcement attention. You said you found items that belonged to Eduardo. Victor continued, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. Items that could be valuable to the right people. Miguel nodded toward the basement stairs. Downstairs, in his office. Victor gestured for Miguel to lead the way. The basement felt different with these men, and it's smaller, more threatening, filled with the promise of violence. Miguel led them to Eduardo's former office, where Elena's carefully constructed trap waited. Eduardo was more careful than we gave him credit for, Miguel said, playing his role as the greedy opportunist. When I started renovating, I found things hidden throughout the house: money, documents, records of business activities. Victor's attention sharpened. How much money? Miguel opened Eduardo's old desk drawer and pulled out one of the bundles of cash Elena had prepared as bait, $50,000 that would prove he'd found Eduardo's stash without revealing the full scope of Elena's discoveries. This was just what I found in the walls upstairs, Miguel said. But there's more, a lot more, hidden in places only someone living here could find. One of Victor's men examined the cash bundle, checking for authenticity. This is Eduardo's money, he confirmed. Same bills, same bands he used. Victor walked around the basement office, his gaze lingering on the maps and photos Eduardo had left behind. Eduardo stole $40 million from our organization before he died. We have been searching for that money for 2 years. Miguel felt sweat running down his back, but forced himself to continue the charade. 40 million? I've only found about 2 million so far, but I haven't searched the whole house yet. Where is the rest? That's what we need to discuss. I want a finder's feet and percent of whatever you recover. In exchange, I'll show you every hiding place Elena found and give you all the records she kept. The mention of Elena's name changed the atmosphere instantly. Victor's 3 companions tensed, and Victor himself stepped closer to Miguel with predatory focus. What do you know about Elena Vasquez? Miguel realized he'd made a mistake. He wasn't supposed to know Elena's name or her role in hiding the money. But it was too late to take back the words, so he pressed forward with desperate improvisation. The neighbors told me about her, Eduardo's wife who died in a car accident. But it wasn't an accident, was it? Someone cut her brake lines. Victor's eyes narrowed dangerously. What makes you say that? Because I found her hiding places. Professional work, carefully planned, systematically hidden throughout the house. Elena wasn't just Eduardo's wife, she was documenting everything he did. And someone killed her for it. Miguel was walking a tightrope between gaining Victor's trust and revealing too much knowledge. He needed Victor to confess to Elena's murder, but he couldn't seem too informed about the details. Elena was a problem that needed to be solved, Victor said carefully. She was interfering with business that didn't concern her. So you solved her? Miguel asked, his voice barely steady. Victor smiled coldly. Elena Vasquez died in a tragic car accident. These things happen when people don't mind their own business. Miguel felt sick, but forced himself to nod, as if he understood the euphemism. And Eduardo? Did he die in an accident too? Eduardo stole from his partners. He forgot that loyalty is a two-way street. Victor's tone carried no emotion, as if discussing the weather. When we discovered his theft, we gave him an opportunity to return what he'd taken. He chose to be stubborn instead. Miguel realized that Victor was confessing to both murders, speaking freely because he assumed Miguel would be dead before morning. The recording device was capturing everything, but Miguel still needed to get Victor to be more explicit about the details. So you killed them both, Miguel said quietly. Victor's smile widened, showing teeth like a predator. Mr. Santos, I think you misunderstand the nature of our relationship. You are not our partner in this venture. You are simply someone who happened to find something that belongs to us. One of Victor's men moved to block the basement exit. Miguel realized the negotiation phase was over, and the execution phase was about to begin. Miguel's hand instinctively moved to his shirt pocket, where Elena's rosary beads pressed against his chest, a physical reminder of her faith and sacrifice. Victor noticed the gesture and stepped closer, his predatory smile widening. Nervous, Mr. Santos? You should be. Eduardo thought he was clever too, right up until the moment he realized his mistake. "What mistake was that?" Miguel asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "He thought he could steal from us and hide behind his wife's innocence. He thought Elena's schoolteacher reputation would protect them both." Victor laughed coldly. "Elena was documenting everything, every transaction, every contact, every crime. She was building a case against all of us." Miguel felt a surge of courage, thinking about Elena's final video message and her desperate hope that someone would finish her work. "So you killed her to stop her from talking?" "We killed her because she was a threat, just like you're a threat now." Victor nodded to his men, who began closing in around Miguel. But Miguel had heard enough. Victor had confessed to both murders in detail, providing exactly the evidence the FBI needed. It was time to spring Elena's trap. Miguel pulled out his phone and pressed the emergency signal app Agent Chen had installed. Somewhere in the darkness outside, FBI agents received the alert and began moving toward the house. "The money isn't here," Miguel said loudly, hoping the recording equipment was capturing every word. "Elena was smarter than you thought. She moved everything before you killed her." Victor's confident expression faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Elena knew you were coming for her. She moved the money and evidence to safety deposit boxes, storage units, places you'd never find. What I showed you upstairs was just a fraction bait to get you to confess." One of Victor's men grabbed Miguel's arm roughly. "You're lying." "Check the basement vault," Miguel challenged. "See for yourself." Victor gestured for his men to examine the floor where Eduardo's main vault was hidden. They pried up the concrete sections Miguel had carefully replaced, revealing the steel-lined chamber completely empty. "Where is it?" Victor demanded, his calm facade cracking. "Gone. Elena moved it all before she died. But she left something else, say, complete record of everyone involved in Eduardo's organization, including you." Victor's face flushed with rage. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Santos. We killed Eduardo in his own bedroom while his children slept down the hall. We made Elena's death look like an accident, so convincing that even the FBI believed it. Do you think killing one more construction worker will trouble our consciences?" Miguel backed toward Eduardo's desk, his heart pounding as he realized the FBI agents weren't moving fast enough. Victor's confession was complete, but Miguel still had to survive long enough for rescue to arrive. "Elena was smarter than all of you," Miguel said, trying to buy time. "She knew you'd come for the money eventually. She knew you'd underestimate whoever found her evidence. She prepared for this exact moment." "Prepared? How?" Victor demanded. Miguel smiled, thinking of Elena's final video message. "She prepared by choosing the right person to finish what she started. Someone you'd never suspect, someone who'd have the courage to see it through." Victor pulled out a Guna professional-looking pistol with a silencer attached. "Enough games. Tell me where Elena hid the money, or I'll kill you the same way I killed her husband." "You want to know how we killed Eduardo?" Victor continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone who enjoyed recounting violence. "We made him watch while we searched his house for the stolen money. When he wouldn't tell us where it was, we put a gun to his head and gave him one last chance. He died, still protecting Elena's secrets." Miguel felt Elena's rosary beads pressing against his chest and drew strength from her memory. "And Elena? How did you kill her?" "Elena was driving to San Antonio to meet with the FBI when we caught up with her. We ran her off the road first, but she survived the crash. So we finished the job, made it look like she died from her injuries." Victor's eyes were cold with remembered satisfaction. "She kept asking about her children's safety right up until the end." Pathetic. Miguel's rage at Victor's casual description of Elena's murder gave him unexpected courage. Elena's children weren't pathetic, and neither was she. She died trying to protect families like mine from animals like you. "And now you'll die for the same reason," Victor said, raising his gun. That's when the basement lights went out. FBI agents had cut the power to the house, plunging the basement into complete darkness. Miguel dropped to the floor behind Eduardo's desk as the sound of splintering wood came from upstairs federal agents breaking down doors throughout the mansion. FBI, nobody move, weapons down. Gunshots erupted in the darkness, Victor's men firing blindly at sounds and shadows. Miguel crawled toward the basement stairs, guided by Elena's rosary beads in his hand and the sound of Agent Chen's voice shouting orders from the ground floor. Emergency lighting flooded the basement as FBI tactical teams descended the stairs with professional precision. Miguel saw Victor trying to escape through a basement window, but Agent Chen was waiting outside. "Victor Ruiz, you're under arrest for the murders of Eduardo Vasquez and Elena Vasquez, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and racketeering," Agent Chen announced as tactical officers surrounded the basement. Victor's 3 men surrendered without further resistance, but Victor himself continued struggling even as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You have no proof. This was entrapment." Agent Chen held up a digital recorder. "We have your complete confession recorded on federal surveillance equipment. Elena Vasquez may be dead, but her evidence just brought down your entire organization." As federal agents led Victor away, he looked back at Miguel with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Santos. There are others who won't forget what you've done." Miguel clutched Elena's rosary beads and thought about her children, her sacrifice, and the families who would finally receive justice. "Elena made sure it would be over," he said quietly. "She planned for everything, including men like you who never learned when to stop." Detective Martinez appeared at Miguel's side as the basement cleared of criminals and tactical officers. "Are you all right?" Miguel looked around Eduardo's former office, the place where Elena had planned her husband's downfall and her own redemption. "I'm alive. Elena's plan worked, and her killers are finally going to face justice." "More than that," Detective Martinez said with satisfaction. "Victor's confession gives us everything we need to prosecute the corrupt officials who protected Eduardo's organization. Elena's evidence is going to clean up law enforcement in this entire region." Miguel smiled, feeling Elena's presence like a benediction. The dead woman's carefully planned justice had succeeded beyond even her hopes. Tomorrow, he would call Sofia and Carlos home to a house that was finally, truly safe, a monument, not to Eduardo's crimes, but to Elena's courage and the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when justice demands it. 6 months later, Miguel stood in the renovated garden behind the mansion, watching Sofia graduate from high school via video call, while Carlos practiced throwing footballs with 3 neighborhood children who now considered the Santos family an integral part of their community. The transformation was complete, but it went far deeper than fresh paint and repaired windows. The mansion had become exactly what Elena had envisioned, not a monument to crime, but a symbol of redemption and community healing. Miguel's legitimate construction business had grown beyond his dreams, employing 12 people including Roberto Morales, who now managed supply logistics from his home office while his injured leg continued healing. "Papa, they're calling my name!" Sofia's excited voice came through his phone as she walked across the stage at her graduation ceremony. She'd chosen to attend college in town rather than accept offers from distant universities, partly to stay close to family, but mainly to continue the community work Elena's restitution had made possible. The money Elena had hidden throughout the house had been distributed exactly as she'd planned. Every family on her list received compensation for their losses, not as charity, but as recognition of the injustices they'd suffered. Mrs. Chen had been able to buy back her original grocery store property and reopen with modern equipment. The Herrera family established a scholarship fund in their murdered son's name. The Morales family not only kept their apartment, but saved enough to make a down payment on a small house. Miguel had insisted on transparency throughout the distribution process. Working with Detective Martinez and a community oversight committee, they'd ensured that every dollar went where Elena intended. The process had taken months of careful documentation and legal review, but Miguel had refused to take shortcuts with Elena's mission. The mansion itself had become a community center of sorts. Sophia tutored children in the large dining room that had once hosted Eduardo's criminal associates. Carlos's mechanical projects in the garage had evolved into an informal after-school program where neighborhood kids learned basic engineering skills. Miguel's workshop in the basement, the same basement where Victor had confessed to murder now, produced custom furniture for local families at affordable prices. The federal investigation had exceeded everyone's expectations. Victor Ruiz and his associates were serving life sentences without parole. More importantly, Elena's evidence had exposed a network of corrupt officials that reached into the state government. 8 police officers, 3 judges, and 2 state legislators had been convicted on corruption charges. The entire criminal justice system in their region had been reformed. Mr. Santos? Detective Martinez appeared at the garden gate, carrying a manila envelope and wearing civilian clothes. She'd left law enforcement after the Vasquez case closed, taking a position with a non-profit organization that helped crime victims navigate the legal system. "Rosa, you don't have to call me Mr. Santos anymore. We've been through too much together for formality." She smiled and handed him the envelope. "This came through official channels today. I wanted to deliver it personally." Miguel opened the envelope and found a letter from the FBI's Victim Services Division, along with a check for $50,000. The letter explained that federal asset forfeiture laws allowed the FBI to provide rewards to civilians who provided crucial assistance in major criminal cases. Miguel stared at the check, thinking about how $50,000 would have changed his family's life just months ago. Now it felt almost insignificant compared to what they'd gained through Elena's mission. "I can't accept this," he said, offering the check back to Rosa. "Why not? You risked your life to bring justice to Elena's killers. You deserve compensation for that courage." Miguel looked around the garden where Sophia was helping Carlos teach younger children how to throw properly, where the mansion's ugly history had been transformed into something beautiful and productive. Elena didn't leave her evidence so that people could profit from it. She left it so that wrongs could be made right. He folded the check and put it back in the envelope. "If the FBI wants to honor Elena's memory, donate this money to the scholarship fund the Herrera family established." That's what Elena would have wanted. Rosa nodded approvingly. "I thought you might say that. Elena chose well when she chose your family to complete her work." After Rosa left, Miguel walked through the mansion one more time, seeing it with fresh eyes. In the kitchen, he paused at the spot where he'd found Elena's final video message. The cookbook was gone now, replaced by Sophia's collection of healthy recipes she'd been testing as part of her pre-med studies. In the master bedroom, Miguel had converted Elena's hidden safe into a display case for family photos pictures of Maria, Sophia's graduation portrait, Carlos's soccer team, and the new family portrait they'd taken to celebrate their first full year in the house. The basement office where Eduardo had planned crimes and Victor had confessed to murder was now Miguel's workshop, filled with the tools of creation rather than destruction. The walls that had once displayed trafficking routes now held blueprints for community improvement projects and photos of the families Elena's restitution had helped. That evening, as the 3 Santos family members sat around the dinner table Elena had never gotten to use, Miguel felt a profound sense of completion. Sophia was discussing her college plans pre-med with a focus on community health services. Carlos was excited about starting high school in the fall and continuing his engineering projects. Miguel's construction business was stable and growing, providing good jobs for people who'd been struggling to support their families. "You know what I realized today?" Sophia said, looking around the dining room with its windows overlooking the valley. "This house feels exactly like what Mama described in her letters. Not just the physical space, but the feeling of it, like a place where good things happen." Miguel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The mansion had become Elena's monument, not through marble or bronze, but through the transformed lives of everyone who'd been touched by her sacrifice. Crime scene tape had been replaced by children's laughter. Fear had been replaced by hope. Corruption had been replaced by justice. Outside, the sun was setting over the valley, casting golden light through the windows Elena had looked through, while planning her husband's downfall and her own redemption. Miguel raised his glass of water in a silent toast to two women who'd shaped his family's destiny: Maria, who'd taught him to see opportunities in challenges, and Elena, who'd trusted him to finish what she couldn't complete. The mansion was no longer Eduardo Vasquez's monument to greed and violence. It wasn't even Miguel Santos's reward for moral courage. It was Elena Vasquez's legacy, proof that love, sacrifice, and the determination to do what's right can transform the darkest places into sources of light for entire communities. And in the quiet evening air, Miguel could almost hear Elena's voice, finally at peace, whispering the words she'd never gotten to say in life: "Thank you for bringing me home."